All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us again today for our third webinar as the Town of Sahuarita. Have an important topic to cover today in the Paycheck Protection Program, which we covered somewhat in our first webinar, but obviously things are changing fairly rapidly, and just want to keep people in the loop. But we're very thankful and happy to have you all join us, those that are returning and those that might be new participants. We are planning to record this webinar as well and make it available for you if someone you know or someone is not able to view it. But I'd like to welcome you from the Town of Sahuarita. My name is Michael. I'm Economic Development Specialist for the town on behalf of our Mayor Murphy, our Town Council, and Town Manager Kelly Udall. Just glad that you're here. We have two wonderful speakers with us today. Number one, we have Eliezer Asunsolo, who is a commercial banker with BBVA Bank. And then Doug Christy, I'm sure many of you know, is the small business coach, owner, operator of Provision Coaching. We want to make today really an interactive discussion. So Ellie is going to just go over some basics of the PPP, 1,000-foot view. And then throughout, we just want to open it up after that to you for questions. So feel free to go on either the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll have just a big time for that after we give a little presentation. So I will hand it over to Ellie, and we'll get this started. Ellie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eliezer Asunsolo with BBVA. We're very happy to partner with Sahuarita on this webinar. I think probably everybody knows the general rules and the outline of what PPP was, but I think we should just focus on what's going on right now, which is everyone probably has seen as of this morning, as of 7 a.m., that the SBA has shut the portal, shut the window for approving new applications. So that means about $339 billion has been used, and they've allocated $10 billion for fees and processing costs. So at this point, if you do not have, the key metric is an SBA ETrans number. If you have that assigned, you're in that allocation. If you do not have one assigned, then you will not be basically funded through this round of funding. Sometimes it's going to be hard to know that because a lot of the banks are so overwhelmed with applications that they're not able to communicate that information back to you. So you may not have heard anything until you get a note saying, here's your loan documents. So at this point, you know, I think the best thing folks can do, you may have seen that Congress tried to pass a $250 billion bill last week, did not go through. I'm assuming those negotiations are ongoing and we'll have another vote at some point. But, you know, if you are someone who has not been able to get in this program, or maybe you weren't sure, I would definitely be calling your representatives to encourage them to, you know, have another round of funding go through. So I think that brings us up to speed to where we are right now as far as the PPP. One more distinction I'll make is if you put an application in, that, again, that does not necessarily mean that made it to the SBA. So that's another pending item.
Muted, Michael.
Yeah, we basically are letting people know whether you've applied or not. It's still important. We anticipate that, you know, negotiations are still ongoing and that there likely will be another wave of funding at some point. We don't know exactly when that's going to be. But yeah, Doug, if you want to put in a few of your questions then.
Yeah, I'll just share things. I'm Doug Christy, as Michael said. I own Provision Coaching. I'm a business coach, so you know, I've been in the trenches with my own clients right now, and just about all of them, with the exception of two, have really tapped into this program. So there's a lot of strategizing thing that goes on with this, which I'll be able to share. And also, I work very closely with the Green Valley Sahuarita Chamber of Commerce and with the Town of Sahuarita, Michael and Victor, as far as helping the local business community just survive through this and thrive on the other end. So very active with this. So very curious to see what some of the questions are. But I'm just going to share just 2 slides to maybe help frame what I'm actually doing with my clients. Michael, is that visible to you?
Yes.
Okay, good. I use this analogy, to the viral analogy to the current business community, because we're so inundated with the media and everything that's going on in our local community as far as the illnesses are concerned. So it's the same thing as individuals, but I think it's very analogous to our business community also. And I really see 4 distinct areas, and I've shared this with several people now and several groups, and it really resonates with them. There's a group of folks that just literally don't have the virus. So these businesses, they have minimal financial issues right now. They're operating. In fact, they may be booming because of just what their needs are right now. And they have no problem believing their business is going to get back to normal, maybe even healthier. So really, the PPP does not apply, okay, to these folks, obviously. You have another group that's asymptomatic, or have had the virus but recovering. Okay, so these are businesses that I call essential. The governor has deemed them essential. They're still working, they're still operating, still generating some revenue, but they just need to leverage the PPP program to have a healthy recovery and get back to whatever that new normal might be. So this is a bridge for them, a recovery, a therapeutic, so to be, right now for them. The ones here, the next one is, you actually have the virus and you have to go to the hospital, but your prognosis is good to recover, but you are hospitalized, you're sick. And a lot of my clients are literally they've been deemed non-essential. So they have no revenue coming in. They need this PPP. They need this to bridge, to stay afloat, basically, to be able to get to the new normal. So they don't feel that they're in a problem, fear of going under, but they really need this a lot. And then the final ones, it's, you hear about this with the New York situation with Governor Cuomo every day. It's like you have the virus, you're hospitalized, and the big metric is who's intubated. And these businesses are basically on life support, and their survival is in question, and they are in our communities. And you can look at the restaurant industry as one of them and saying, are they going to be around whenever we're able to go back and go into restaurants again? So they're in trouble, and we understand that. So really, to frame this call and things that I'm working on, how can a PPP bridge to the new normal? And I really, with my clients, I'm setting July 1st as a new January 1st, and I only do that because those who have applied for this PPP loan and are getting it, and when it's going to be funded, and an 8-week clock of forgiveness, it's getting you into mid-June, about July. So this is a lifesaver for a lot of businesses to July. So one of the things that I'm really working on with my clients, and hopefully this business community here, is that how do you get to the new January 1st, July? So it's the ones that don't have the virus and are fine. We're not talking about those. They're the ones that are really, really sick and dying right now, that are really having trouble right now. There's other professionals that can help them, okay, with exiting or just trying to, but the ones that we're really, I think the PPP is the 2 center ones. I've been deemed essential. I'm still working. It's a financial bridge for me, which is a huge lifesaver for them. If they still have sufficient gross revenue that they're still producing, maybe not at the levels that pre-COVID, they're looking at things about trying to keep the entire team in place. And that was it. That was the intent of this. It's like, if you think you can keep your team in place, we're going to help you and not send them to the unemployment lines. All right, so that was a big thing with this PPP program. The delay in getting the funds has made that problematic if they've kept the team on, because they've had to finance their team until they get the loan, and that's not recoverable. All right, they had the finance team and overhead to get to this particular loan. So there's been some issues there. And if their gross revenue is insufficient, they have very little revenue coming in. They may probably using this PPP to keep key employees around the management team, and probably used the layoff mechanism, incentive to unemployment for the workers that I will call non-essentials, but hopefully they can get them back in the workforce. The final one really is they have the hot virus, they're hospitalized, their prognosis is to recover, but I tell you, they were deemed non-essential. They have no revenue, and they're looking at the PPP versus a longer-term disaster loan, basically, which is out there, because they may need more money to bridge more time into July 1st. Some can make it, some can't. But literally, they're going to be advised to lay off the non-essential workforce immediately, to cut your cost as much as you can, but try to keep that management team and key employees intact. So there's strategies around having this wonderful mechanism called the PPP. It's problematic in the timing and when they're getting the money, but it could be a lifeline and a lifesaver for a lot of folks too. But it's not simple, and you really have to figure out what's best for you, and you have to get your team of professional advisors around you, including your bank, to really help you how to use this right now. So that's just a tee up, Michael, of things that I've experienced in the trenches with business owners right now, and we can really open this up for discussion, because that's where they're going to be the heart and soul of this webinar.
Yeah, and if any participants do have questions, again, please write them in either the chat or the Q&A. I thought, Ellie, maybe we could go over kind of what we talked about, the three of us, the other day, just kind of what you're seeing in terms of the process of application to receipt or notification of receipt, to, okay, am I approved, to, we actually get a check. So maybe if you just want to go over kind of what that has been looking like, just for our participants, those that may have applied already or may have not applied.
Yeah, so BVA was one of the first banks to open the portal. I think BofA opened before us, but it really depended on where you applied, like where you were in the continuum, where your application came in. If you were in very early, like on the first weekend that the portal was open, we saw a much faster turnaround on those than we are now. Applications that we were submitting, let's say late last week, have been delayed quite a bit. So I think initially the time frame we were seeing 3 to 4 business days to get an SBA approval, and then another 3 business days. So maybe total of about just over a week to go from application to funding. Now it's looking closer to 2 weeks, or even more than 2 weeks, even possibly up to 3 weeks. And so that's probably the more realistic time frame now, especially because as you get thousands and thousands of applications, it just creates a bottleneck inside the bank at every stage, putting it into the system, putting it in for SBA approval, and then putting it into the document hub.
Okay. I saw a question just come in here. Maybe you can read it too, but I'll just say, we are a 501c3, Santa Cruz Training Programs, Inc. Is it worth filling out an application for a PPP?
Yeah, I think it is. I think internally, we have a lot of applications that did not make it to the SBA, but we're going to continue to underwrite those applications for the time being. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen going forward, but we feel like anyone that submitted an application to us, we should be looking at it and seeing if all the documentation is there and getting prepared if in fact there is another round of funding. Those people will already be in the queue. So there are, at this point, several thousand applications in the bank that did not make it to the SBA. So we want to have all those teed up and ready if in fact there's additional funding.
So essentially they would be in the queue, they have their name or their number in the line, and once that funding becomes available, hopefully again, the banks will answer, SBA will answer to them in the order in which they applied. So that kind of leads into another question. It says here, if a business was not able to submit a PPP application, what do you recommend they do in the meantime? Would one of those be, would you recommend they still apply because they will be put in that queue?
Yeah, I think it says if you are not able to submit a PPP application. So I'm assuming that means that the bank shut the portal and said, we're not accepting any more applications. I would definitely have everything ready. Understand every bank's going to have a little bit of a different checklist. Understand what the checklist is. Do you have all those items? And be ready for when, if and when this opens up again. As far as I know, and I didn't look right before the webinar here, but to see if we're still accepting applications or not. That was the one question I didn't get answered before we started here, but definitely continuing to gather any information that you need, your payroll records, your organizational documents. Some folks were having, that actually became an issue with some clients. They couldn't track down their org docs. And so, it took that kind of added a day of delaying. So just making sure you have everything on that list.
A question I have, follow up to that one, Ellie, is that what makes a bank cut off the application process, cut off their portable? What are they looking at? What metric are they looking at saying, somebody say, keep bringing it in and we'll keep queuing it up, or we can't do that anymore, we have to stop? What's that decision process in a bank?
Typically the way that that's managed internally is when the numbers are just getting to a point where we could not work that many applications. So the bank will sometimes look at what's in the queue, and then they will actually close the portal for a certain amount of time, whether it be 24 hours, just so we can get through some of the workload, get some of the applications that are already in, process those, get those moving before we start taking in more applications. So that's kind of the general procedure. And so in this case, I don't know if we're accepting applications now because we really don't know what's going to happen going forward.
Had another question come through here. They said, is it a guarantee that a loan that has been approved will be funded within 10 days after approval?
So the key word there is approval. So my understanding is that word approved means the date from when you have an SBA approval, which is when you have earmarked funds. So yeah, I don't see really an issue of 10 days from that date for having a funding. I don't anticipate that anyone's going to have an issue with that, but I think it can be, people may not, they don't really know what's happening inside the bank. So when is it approved? I think maybe they're not going to be able to know that question, the answer to that question. But I don't think that the 10 days is an issue after the SBA approval.
Would they actually get an ETrans number on that approval? Or is that just something internal to the bank, knowing that now they can put out a formal letter or an email to the applicant?
Yeah, the ETrans number is something the bank gets internally. It's basically secures our guarantee. Those numbers are typically not sent out to the customers. But like I said, depending on what channel you went through at your bank, you may or may not have a contact, and they may or may not have that information if you've been approved or not. I was able to help I work on the commercial side of the bank. We also have our retail side of the bank, and I was able to help one of our retail customers find out if they had an SBA approval, but I wasn't able to find the actual number. So it just depends on which department's handling it and what information they have.
Yeah, a follow-up that I've got about 2 or 3 clients this morning after hearing the news that the funding has run out. Even though their bank said, your application has been processed, which gives them a feeling that, okay, it's in the queue and I'm okay. And then they hear this, how do I know I'm actually funded? And, with advice, I say, you need to call them. Okay, you need to contact the bank to find out. So if somebody calls and you don't have the ETrans number, you're looking at, how do you know that it is going to be funded or not? Do you have to continue to wait for that ETrans number before you can give the customer an answer on that?
Yeah, if there wasn't one assigned, or if we're not showing that there's an SBA approval prior to 7 a.m. this morning, then that means that application was not issued an SBA number.
So today is the cutoff.
This morning at 7 o'clock, the SBA closed the window.
So no ETrans number, that means they're not funded, and then you would contact the applicant and tell them so.
Well, it depends. That also depends. So if it was a customer that I was personally handling, then yes, I would call them, and I did that this morning with a couple customers. But if you're going through the retail channels, and when I say retail channels, I mean the branch system, the branch network. If you're in that network, are you going to get a call or an email saying you didn't get approved? You probably will. I just don't know when. But I think it might be safe to say that if you were if you applied late last week, middle last week, chances are that it did not get to the SBA window.
Hey, Doug, I was wondering, maybe you could go through some of the document preparation. Let's say that you're asking your clients maybe to go through, or maybe just what you're going in specific items that you're asking them to put together as they apply for this.
That's a great question. And Ali probably is better equipped to answer that, but the short answer is every bank has different requirements. There's some basic payroll documents, 940s, 41s that everybody has to get together, obviously. But I'm telling you, every client, different bank, different criteria that they have to do to apply. And that has caused a serious delay because some banks require certain documentation that is not readily available for clients, and they have to go get it. And in this time of everybody working remote, it's not easy to grab something very quickly. So sometimes it's a day, 2, 3 delays just to get required information that the bank requires. And Ali, you help me on this. Just about everyone's just a tad different depending on the bank or institution you're applying for. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's safe. 941 tax statements, some kind of an internal payroll document is what we were getting from most of our customers. So they just pull it down from their payroll provider, from QuickBooks, showing, the year-end numbers, their organizational documents. Typically, those are going to be the bulk of what you're going to need to gather. One of the things that we were asking for was February payroll numbers for 2020 to show that they did have employees at February 15th, which is the date that's specified in the guidelines. So we wanted to show not only the 19 numbers, but also the February numbers that they were continuing in business. Now, one thing I would add as well is that the bank, BBVA, is open to, some of the banks did not accept applications from non-customers. So they said you either need to have a existing checking account or loan with the bank in order to do that. Now we have in a way the same policy, but we're open. The bank is open if folks are right now looking, okay, I haven't got my app in, or I know people who have not, that if you come to the bank and you open an account, then they will consider that an eligible participant if in fact there is another round of funding. So if you didn't get too far with your institution, that may be an option for you. And the bank's not restricting it if you're just a new customer, is what I'm trying to say.
Anecdotally, to that point, it seemed that the community banks worked better than the bigger banks, okay, for the majority of my customers and what I'm hearing. Not sure why, but can you give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, part of it has to do with the BSA requirements. So I think the rationale, the reason that the banks were doing this is because one of the requirements is we have to meet the Know Your Customer requirements, which means we have to have socials and driver's license. We have to identify all the signers and have all the organizational documents for the businesses. Well, If you have an existing client and you have an existing loan out to a customer, you already have all that information. So if you want to service the maximum amount of your customers, then you will go with the people that you have already had. You don't need to collect any information on them. You can push more people through the funnel. And of course, like we talked about, the SBA ETrans number was the key to this whole thing. So the faster you can get the applications in through the bank, the faster you can get into the SBA window and get more people approved. So that was the initial rationale about why the banks took that approach.
Those that I saw we had 3 or 4 more join in the last few minutes. We've just been doing kind of a Q back and forth here. If you have any questions for Doug or for Ellie, again, Ellie is a commercial banker with BBVA Bank. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer those. It's like we had one just come in. It says, what do you suggest for a business owner when deciding on he or she should wait for a potential round of funding to become available or send employees to unemployment?
Great question.
Tough question.
Okay. Doug, I think that's a Doug question.
Here's the problem on the front end of that was the perception was on Friday, April, was it 3rd? Yeah. It was said from Mnuchin himself that you go into a bank and walk out with the money. Just maybe it was tongue in cheek, but the whole thing was just going to be super quick. It's going to be simple and super quick. So some decisions were made from small business owners not to lay anyone off, because in a week or so, okay, they would have the next 8 weeks financed. To keep their employees on, which was the whole thing about this PP. Keep your people. Don't send them to the unemployment if you can. We're going to make it really easy for you to keep them and keep them on payroll. And most employers wanted to do that. So then there was a difference between essential and non-essential. So my clients who were deemed non-essential, no revenue, that was still a gamble because they didn't know when they were able to get back. So just, 2 weeks maybe not enough type thing for them. So those who were still essential and working and had some revenue coming in, they definitely went for this PPP. That was not a problem for them. So you had a decision make point right there. But others who were deemed non-essential, no revenue, a large workforce of a large electrical contractor in Seattle with 40 journeymen and whatever, that was a big payroll to cover. And if you had no work, and if it was prolonged, it's like we got to look at the layoff and use the PPP to maybe keep key management employees. I think what Randy might be getting to is these are more highly compensated employees. The state of Arizona has, I believe, the second lowest state unemployment, okay, in the country, a couple $100 versus, other states could be $600-700. You put the $600 kicker per week on that. And there's some people in the state of Arizona that's saying, lay me off. Okay, so I can make more going to unemployment. So I did have some clients like that were basically saying, why are you keeping me around if there's no business? I can make more in the unemployment line. And the question is, well, if I take you over there, I might lose you. I want to keep you here and try to keep you working and doing something. So that was a real challenge right off the front. Do I lay them off? Do I keep them on? And it was all a timing issue. Okay, when I can get this money. What's turned out to be, to Ellie's point, a 3-week process, arguably a month to get funded. Those who elected to keep their workforce on, they're paying that overhead and those payrolls that's not recoverable and not forgivable during that time. Clock starts when you're funded on the 8-week period for forgiveness. So there is a risk reward that every business had to look at as far as what tool to use. PPP, unemployment. It's a great question.
Yeah, Randy, I would just add to Doug's comment there that if it was me, my opinion would be if it was my business, I would be evaluating how well capitalized am I? Because like Doug's saying, you don't know when the end of this is going to be, and we're talking, 3 to 4 weeks. It's important to remember that even if you have not put an application in now, just like I mentioned earlier, the bank is keeping all of the applications in the queue in case something changes with Congress and they do apply more money. So even if you put your application in now, you're getting in line behind thousands of other people. So you got to take that into consideration about how well capitalized am I? Can I continue to pay these folks? And can I do that for another 4 weeks without, completely closing the doors? So I think if it was me, that's what I would be thinking about.
We just had a question come through. It says, I have a client whose grandparents claimed 3 kids in 2018 and just received the full $3,900 benefit, but they did not file for 19. But the parents this year filed with the 3 kids and they received $3,900. They're saying, how is this going to work? They are scared to use the money in case they have to give it back. So I'm assuming they received the same benefit for the kids from different years because the grandparents versus the parents claimed. Yeah, I guess that's difficult to say. I mean, to the person that's asking, or I wonder if they're asking if they use it at all or if they use it for a business, will they have to give it back? I assume if it's been given to them, I don't know how the government would really take it back unless I'm reading it wrong, unless they're asking if they use it for a business.
Yeah, basically this is not a PPP question. This is a personal stimulus tax. I don't think anybody on this call is equipped professionally to answer that question. It's a great question.
Right.
I don't think I would touch it, but Ellie, you may, and with your background, be able to answer it a little bit better than Michael or I.
Yeah, it's definitely a tax question, but it's funny because where this gets complex is sometimes returning money to the IRS is actually fairly complicated. So yeah, I would definitely talk to an accountant, a tax accountant about what would be the correct thing to do here.
Right.
It seems like the intent. I mean, we could just go right to the intent, which is the intent is that you're receiving a stimulus check based on who your dependents are. If you no longer have those dependents, then that would be improperly allocated, I guess. But maybe returning the money, I don't know how that would work either.
Right. I was going to say we had a question earlier today, just about timing from someone who said they were in business, but they had just started. They had hired someone at the beginning of this year that was on their payroll. And so maybe you can just speak to that. I know you basically have to be in business by February 15 in order to be eligible for the PPP.
Yeah, so we had some customers that, the situation that we dealt with was a customer who bought out a partner, formed a new entity, and that entity was active as of January 1. So they're still eligible, even though the dissolved entity was really the same, one and the same, but we applied under the new entity and used the January, February numbers to get the average for the payroll.
Okay.
Another anecdotal fact, not if it's anecdotal, I guess it's not a fact, but out there was that the banks were allocated so much funding of that $349 billion. So your bank had so much of that $349 billion. Is that correct, generally speaking?
Yeah, generally, yes.
Okay, so you know that number out front, right? Basically what it is.
No, I do not know what that number is.
Okay.
That is something that, the bank wouldn't be able to release that anyway, even if I had it. because of since we're publicly traded, it's hard to release any information that is any specific information, because all that has to be disclosed in the SEC filings. So we wouldn't be able to give out any preliminary numbers that might in the future conflict with our filings.
So then the present queue you have right now, and there will be a second round of funding. We don't know when, but we're pretty sure there'll be a second round of funding from the feds in this program. You may have more in your queue now than you will be allocated. Is that correct? It's possible. It's possible.
I would say it's possible. It's a possibility.
So when would you know to open up your portal again? And if you did not have that number and you have 1,000 queued up, that only 500 could be funded, how would you know if you don't have that number to open up the portal or not when the second round of businesses come knocking on your door?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That would be, I think that'd be challenging, because until we have that SBA number, that loan is technically not even marked as eligible for funding. So, I mean, somebody above my pay grade is probably looking at that data and making that determination. But my hope is that the federal government, at least for our bank, for BBVA, will look at, the fact that we went out very early. We assigned, 750 people who don't even work in the back office to work on this program. We set up a portal in 3 days, and that they would give us, maybe the same or more than what we had this time around, so that we could not only service whoever's left, and maybe that number is being rolled up and saying, this is what's in the queue now, and we want to be able to do more, and so that's what we're going to need.
Question here. It said the overhead expenses, which are forgivable in addition to one's payroll expenses. Where can a business owner find the specifics of what qualifies as an overhead expense? Or when will this info become available?
So we talked about this a little earlier between ourselves, but the current guidance, and Michael, were you able to send those 2 attachments out with the webinar, the interim ruling and then the FAQ?
I could be wrong. I believe they were part of the registration, but if not, we can send it as a follow-up, those links. I do have those documents that you sent me.
So Hillary, the interim final, or the interim rule, is where it lists out the eligible expenses, and let me just pull it up so I can read it directly.
Yeah, if you know where it is, or you find it or want to share your screen, you could do that.
Okay, so this is how this is dated February 2nd. I'm sorry, April 2nd. And it included interest on mortgage obligations incurred. So the mortgage obligation had to be incurred before February 15th. Rent payments on leases dated before February 15th. Utility payments under service agreements dated before February 15th over the 8-week period following the date of the loan. So right now, that's all the guidance that we have as of that date on what is going to qualify as an overhead expense. Now, the other question, which I don't have an answer to, but has come up, is you can use 25% of the money on overhead expenses, but do you have to hit the 75% for payroll in order to get the 25, or are those 2 separate components? So for example, if you got a $100,000 loan, you spend $25,000 on your overhead, you spent $50,000 on payroll, you have $25,000 left over there. Does that matter? Or do you still get forgiveness on the utilities and on the payroll, but then you're going to have to term out the $25,000? That's a question that has come up, but we don't have an answer to.
Are you, Ellie, I was just going to say, are you receiving, let's say, guidance from the feds every day or every week, or?
Yeah, there's a lot of rumors. There's nothing that is in writing.
Okay.
but we were getting an update to the FAQ, you know, every day almost. So there's definitely, to answer the second question, when will it become available? There will be more coming and more available, but it'll be, you know, for me, you know, I want to wait until I see the document with that spelled out.
Sure. Doug, did you have a question?
No, just, I think Randy's got a good one that we can get into right here.
Yeah, he says, to the people who already received their money, what are some actions that they will be required to do to qualify for their loan forgiveness?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. There's, again, back to what I just said, there's really no more additional guidance than what's in this what's called the interim final rule. And there are some questions with regards to the definitions of these terms, and especially so when you go and you do the calculation for the loan forgiveness, the first test is going to be the 75-25. And I already kind of mentioned you know, where that's kind of gray with, you know, is all of it forgivable? Do you have to spend it all on payroll in order to get the 25? But the other test is going to have to do with, did you maintain your FTE equivalencies, and did you cut anybody's pay more than 25%? So how that's going to be documented is unclear right now, because what if you just take that out to its logical conclusion, we're going to need to see documentation showing what your full-time equivalents were for this time last year, or they're also allowed, there's two periods they're allowing, I believe it's February to June last year, or January to March this year, or January to February this year. So what was your full-time equivalency then? Provide documentation for that, and then provide that same documentation showing what your FTE equivalent was for the 8 weeks following when you received the money. How do you document that? I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if the payroll companies can come up with a report for that. But the other thing is, you know, if you say, well, we need to understand if you cut anybody's pay, then we're going to have to see everybody's pay and their pay grade, how many hours they worked, what their hourly number was, and verify, I mean, literally verify, go through hundreds of employees sometime in some cases to see if people's pay was cut in order to put it into this calculation. So it's, I think, oh, go ahead, Doug.
No, I'm sorry, complete your thought. I've got a question, follow up on that.
Yeah, so it's going to be complicated, I think, and it's going to be where, you know, I would keep every piece of document, anywhere that money goes, I would have a paper trail for that, because the forgiveness part is really where this is going to happen. Now, you know, my opinion is if you don't have portions of the loan forgiven, I think people are concerned about that. I personally would not be that concerned about it because of the favorable terms of the loan. So even if, you know, for some reason you're not able to pay all your employees and you do have some leftover funds and you have to term it out, well, I don't know where you're going to get those kind of terms in the credit market in general.
Yeah, the question is the challenges with the FTEs, and that was confusing with, you know, how important was that in the forgiveness period, because many businesses are seasonal. And if your average FTEs and payroll is this, but your 8-week period is peak season and you have this type of payroll, but this type of, you know, metric, you know, it's not all going to be forgiven because you just happened to, your timing was off. And it happened just the opposite. Okay, you do the whole year and you're in a slow season and you had more payroll, so all that's going to be forgiven. So the FTEs is interesting versus just the macro amount. Why would that matter when you're just looking at the macro amount of payroll, the absolute amount versus the absolute amount? Why is FTEs important? And to me, you start doing the FTEs, that really puts a burden on you, Ellie, because now you're looking at FTEs, individuals, pay raises and stuff, and that can make this forgiveness process draw out for a lot of paperwork on the back end of this. Not much on the front end, simple application, still some issues. But boy, I see the back end drawing out potentially because of the FTE issue, quite honestly, more so than anything else.
Yep.
Question for Ellie. Do you see, I guess from your bank, do you get any sense of the types of businesses that are applying? Or, I mean, are you seeing a lot of nonprofits or businesses, or I don't know if you're able to share that anecdotally, or are you seeing mostly businesses, or what would you say you guys are seeing from your bank?
Well, it was all over the board. I mean, every industry. I think the one we maybe saw less of was construction, because those guys are still working. But a lot of, actually surprisingly, a lot of medical, because a lot of those places are closed. The hospitals don't have elective surgeries going, so you have a lot of surgeons that are not working. That's a whole nother issue. People even getting laid off now, nurses being laid off because there's nothing, they don't have enough COVID cases and there's no elective surgery. So there's a limited amount of beds being filled at the moment. But there was definitely not-for-profits were hit pretty hard because folks are just not going to be making the normal donations. And if you're in Tucson, you normally will attend a lot of these fundraisers in the spring. All those have been canceled. Golf tournaments, dinners, all that stuff. Well, these people are trying to put them into this fall, but there's already fall events that everybody's scheduled to go to, assuming they're going to still happen. So, those folks may be aced out of a full year of fundraising. So that's going to be very problematic for them, I think. The one thing that did come up with the 501c3, 501c19s is that it appears that the guidance is that only those two type of not-for-profits are eligible to apply. So that was another thing that has come up as well.
Go ahead, Doug.
Go ahead. I have a question on the queue. Is there some hard and fast rules and regulations that you have in the banking industry or your individual bank on the queue? Is it literally first come, first serve? It's like a line. I have mine in. So, what constitutes being my place in your line or your queue? How does that work?
Yeah, my understanding it's like a timestamp. It's like when we receive the application and we say all the documentation is here and the bank has accepted your application, that's your place in line.
So it's literally by the minute someone got in and time stamped and boom, boom, boom. So depending on how much you're allocated from up here in the Fed, right? You just start the ones that are in the queue. Right. So the new allocation, the ones that are in the queue but didn't make it, that don't have a number, not funded. Okay, here it starts again, whenever it's going to start again, and here they go. Right in order. Would I have any idea where I am in the queue if I called you?
No. I mean, you could tell me what day you applied and I could maybe give you an idea, but no.
So,
good, honest answer.
So, this is important for my clients, okay, and the business community, because you have so much money in your bank. You're going to have so much funding from the source that you're not able to disclose publicly, okay, but internally, and where I am, okay, and that timestamp is $150 million, and Doug's down here, at 151, I'm done. Right? I'm not going to make it. I'm going to be cut off. I need to know so I can go to another bank.
Well, that's the position that a lot of people are in right now. Is that the other part is that the part of the rule is that you're not allowed to apply twice. So once your application is in with a bank, you really shouldn't be applying with another bank, because then there would be a chance that you could be double funded, and that would be not a good thing.
No.
Well, a worse thing would be not funded.
I don't know if it'd be worse because it's specifically, it's specifically listed that you cannot do that. So if you've gone, afoul of that, you may have a different problem on your hands.
Well, there was one of the biggest banks in the country that literally told my clients who were customers of theirs to go to another bank. But
Yeah,
I guess they weren't in their queue. They didn't want them in their queue.
Oh yeah, I think that's different though.
Oh, yeah, that's a different that's a different point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say there's going to be a lot of backlash. If I'm your longtime customer, I'm in the queue, you can't tell me. And can I pull myself out of the queue?
Yeah, you can withdraw your application.
Okay. So the only way that I really should go to another bank is to withdraw my application for you. Because if you tell me we have a monster queue and there's a chance, Doug, you may not get funded. Would you have that conversation with me? Can you have that conversation with me? I'm a customer of your bank, long time,
yeah.
and I'm in a queue.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know the answer to that question because we don't know if this is even going to happen. This additional 250. So, and then you'd be in the same. I mean, I think you'd be in the same situation going somewhere else. They're going to have their queue of all these people that didn't make it in, and you're just getting in the back of that line. So you're probably better off staying where you are, and hopefully are closer than you would be going somewhere else.
Yeah, that would be the theory.
Yeah, yeah.
That's tough. Look, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now. Okay, I think we all, you didn't ask for this, so it's tough, and the business owners didn't ask for this either, and it's tough. So what they like is just like straight answers. Tell me what the rules are, and if you don't know, you just don't know. Mm-hmm. Then I'll make a decision on that, whether I jump line. It's like you're in a grocery store, right? And it's a long line. It looks like it's a shorter line, and you jump it. Pretty soon, you should have stayed in that line. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Happens all the time, right? Yep. It's one of those deals. It's like, man, do I stay? Do I stay in this line, or do I go to another line? So as professional advisors, we sort of want to say, I really don't know what you do. Maybe you ought to stay right where you are. It's the best advice. Yep.
Oh, so we're approaching the end of the hour. Is there maybe, Ellie, is there a way, or I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, like if people have any follow-up questions with you, how they would best get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm totally open to that. If you have something you want to take offline, I can give you my best shot at answering. I think email is probably the best. That way I can kind of field it as time allows. And then if you want to shoot that out, Michael, on an email, I can give that to you.
Yeah, and it's your BBVA. You could even write that in here. Any last questions, Doug, from you?
No, I don't. I just say that those businesses that are in they're in trouble right now, and they weren't able to be funded, or they're in queue right now and they don't know that they can bridge. I would say call your professional resources or advisors or somebody right now. And as you know, Michael and Randy and Victor, we're all working on those folks right now to make those folks visible to our business community to tap into. Just like if you have any tax type questions or some other type of questions, but specifically to the PPP program. So I think just making these professional advisors visible to the community will help during this time.
The one last comment I'll throw in, some of our clients have been telling us that they've been getting scam emails from people saying, this is the SBA, we have your documents ready, click on the link. So just be aware, if you know anybody who's gotten one, just tell them to be aware of that.
Especially if you haven't applied.
Or yeah, exactly, yeah. Anybody who's applied should be very wary of getting some email directly from the SBA, which is not how it would work.
Yeah, that's good to know. Unfortunately, in these times, the fraudsters come out in full force.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Ellie and Doug. And yeah, we will make this available at some points to view for anyone that was not able to attend. But thank you guys, and thank you to all of our attendees.
Okay, thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Take care.
Bye-bye.